Jim Masters, CUTV News. Today, my guest is Rene Murata. Rene is a true facilitator in every sense of the word, whether it's the safety and security of the people working in potentially hazardous conditions or coaching women leaders to draw on their intuitive healing selves. Rene Murata is motivated by a desire to use her extensive expertise to help others. She describes herself as an enlightened entrepreneur. She's the founder of R.i.s.k. Integrity Safety Knowledge Incorporated, R.i.s.k. Incorporated, a global safety consulting company offering a full range of technical consulting, training, and staffing services in process safety and risk management. Rene and her team of engineers, process safety specialists, and others set out to create a company of highly trained individuals that provide a full range of technical consulting, training, and staffing services. R.i.s.k. works with companies that want to go above and beyond regulatory compliance. They have them understand the generally accepted good engineering practices, and they assist in identifying what solutions are appropriate. Rene has since expanded R.i.s.k. Incorporated to Sao Paulo, Brazil, an emerging market in the gas and oil industry. And with her language skills in Portuguese and Spanish, R.i.s.k. Incorporated is uniquely positioned in the South American market. Now, today, she's committed to facilitating the next generation with CEO Essence, which is a coaching practice for emerging women business leaders. Rene Murata joins me on the CUTV News set today to discuss all of this and lots more. Rene, welcome. It's good to have you with us on CUTV News.
You, Jim. Thank you.
So there's a lot there. You've obviously done a lot. You continue to do a lot. You've accomplished incredible things in your life. What first inspired you to take the path that you're on now?
That's a good question. So I think what started me on R.i.s.k., anyway, not think, I know what started me on R.i.s.k. was there was an incident. I was working in a refinery, the same refinery as my husband and my brother-in-law. And there was an incident that involved the two of them, one that could have left me a widow. And so I became intimately aware of the hazards of working in an environment like that. And so I started down the path of better understanding process safety management due to that incident. So from there, it just kind of blossomed.
Now, was that something that you ever thought you'd be involved in? Did you study this?
Oh, no.
Was the schooling part of this? Or you thrust into that?
I was thrust into it. I actually studied math and physics and thought I would go into the research world. And my husband got a job in California 8 months before I got a job in California. So I just kind of took the job that was handed to me, and it turned out it was at the same refinery that he was at. And yeah, so I fell into it. You
fell into it, literally.
Yeah.
So tell us about the company R.i.s.k. How is it formed? What's the mission? What are some of the things, when you initially said we wanted to assemble this incredible team of people that you have working with you to create this company? Obviously, you identified situations like the one you just described that need attention, that need support, that need assistance. So tell us about the development of R.i.s.k. and the germ of that, and then how you took it from there.
Okay, so I started working for one of my competitors. And what I realized is that it was a very competitive environment that I was working in, and it was very difficult for me to get the training that I needed at that organization. And I found that that was true when I started talking to people. I found that it was true. Everybody kind of had their little niche. They had their client that they worked with. They had their specialty and that sort of thing. And I didn't want a competitive environment. I didn't thrive in that kind of environment. So I wanted to develop a more cooperative environment. So I left that company to start my own, and that's exactly what I've developed. I have a QA manager, trainer. She trains all of our facilitators and mentors them. We don't have our little fiefdoms. You know, we have monthly training sessions where we continue to improve and make sure there's a lot of cross training that goes on. And
so you like a lot of collaboration and team and people working together for the common good.
Yes. Yes, I think it's important. And as a woman, I knew that a competitive environment for me would drain me, would eventually, I would be unhappy. And women tend to be very, we want to work together, but we don't necessarily know how to work together type of thing. And so I wanted to create that environment.
And sometimes people also, I'm sure you've seen this in the business world, we've all seen it, even in my industry too, sometimes you see it. Somebody might have certain knowledge, but they are afraid or don't want to share that with somebody else, that in the long run, it would be beneficial to do that because it would help both of them.
Right.
But they are fearful of sharing this knowledge or this training or expertise because they fear their own job, or they don't want them to advance beyond them. That happens sometimes, doesn't it?
I think it does. But for me, I'm a mother as well. And my job as a mother is to prepare my child to move beyond where I've gotten. So if my job as a mother, the most important job in my life, is to help them go beyond me, then my job as an employer should be the same. I want that. I want people to move to that place where they're exceeding in some capacity. And if that moves them beyond me, well, then it moves them beyond me. And so yeah, definitely.
So when you decided to create r.i.s.k, and again, bring the team together to create r.i.s.k and found this company, tell us about what that was like for you to do that, to take on that risk, to create a company in the way that you did so beautifully, because it's very successful and it's global, obviously, and that doesn't happen overnight. Tell us that process of, and again, it could be something that's empowering for somebody watching right now, too, who's thinking about doing something like that. What was that like for you, that process of the germ of the idea and then putting the people together to make it happen?
First of all, it was terrifying. I won't lie. I won't say that I knew what I was doing when I jumped into it. I definitely had studied business, and I had some ideas. There were moments that I thought I was going to fail, so I want to be very clear about that. But what I did is I realized these are my strengths. My strength is bringing people together and recognizing what my weaknesses are. And so by recognizing what my weaknesses are, I was able to fill those gaps with the appropriate people. And in so doing, was able to develop a management team, that's where I started, that I was very comfortable with, that I knew that no matter what, we were going to make it through whatever challenge we got through. And so I started with that. The next thing for me is recognizing that if something didn't do well, I have learned to take a look at that and go, okay, how can I learn from this? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't do well.
They're frozen, they panic, they don't know what to do next, and sometimes they even retreat.
Right.
Well, you said, okay, this is the situation I'm confronted with. How do I make the best of this? How do I take this and turn, the lemon into lemonade?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly that.
That's a great thing, and you would recommend that to folks who are in similar situations then.
Yes.
Look at the positive, look at the silver lining, just because if you don't, you will go backwards versus forward.
Well, you'll go backwards or you're destined to repeat it.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So if you don't learn your lesson, you're going to repeat it.
Yes. So let's talk about the company again for our audience watching. I mentioned in the introduction some of the things that you do, but how you define the work of r.i.s.k?
Okay. So we work with companies, gas, oil, chemicals, petrochemicals, anybody who has toxic, flammable, hazardous chemicals that can harm the employees, the public, or the environment. And so what we do is we go in, we work with teams of people to help them understand the true hazards that they have, the true risks that they have. So for example, if this valve fails closed, what's going to happen? Are you going to have an overflow? Are you going to have an overpressure and have an explosion? Okay, so let's define that scenario. Then let's take a look at the severity, the likelihood, the safeguards that you have in place. How rigorous are these safeguards? And then do you have any gaps? If you have a gap, then we make a suggestion, a recommendation. So that's what I do.
So an example of the type of company that you would work with, can you give us some examples?
I can't give you names, but
industries.
Yeah, industries. So any of the big gas and oil companies. There are some petrochemical companies that develop paints, that develop product that is then used in the gas and oil industry, biochemicals.
Air conditioning, food, beverage, all of that
yes,
area too.
Yes. So and people don't realize that a lot of the food industry has ammonia.
Mm-hmm.
For refrigeration. Mm-hmm. So we even work with food companies. Yeah.
So is it that you're trying to prevent disasters from happening? Mm-hmm. You've really got to be on top of thinking ahead when seeing these potential issues, right. These potential issues that can really turn into hazmat situations, right?
Right.
So that's where you have the team of experts who really go in there and sort of, I mean, that's really, when you think about it, it's really amazing. It's sort of trying to predict things before.
Well, we rely on the site. So the operator, they know their plant inside out, upside down, and sideways. The engineer knows the process, and oftentimes the operator knows the process as well as the engineer. So we rely on their expertise. I'm not an expert in a lot of the chemicals, nor am I going to be. That's not my job. My job is to lead them through the questions and to really push them to understand their hazards. So they'll start to say, well, it's just never going to happen. I go, yeah, you know what? It happened down the road at that other plant.
Right.
Or, that time that the plant tripped, and shut down, it almost happened. And so therefore, you guys need to stop and think about that. Your safeguards, they function the way they're supposed to, but what happens if they don't?
So, of course, safety is paramount. That's number one for the company's employees, the staff, maybe even clients visiting, the whole thing. But secondary and of equal importance, really, is also regulatory compliance, bringing these people into compliance so they don't have any issues in that department. Tell us about that and how that works.
Okay, so industry we have OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. And they have designed some programs. So there's 14 elements that the companies have to comply with. And so they have determined that there has to be a process hazard analysis. That's the study that I was just talking about, done every 5 years for a plant. Audits have to be done every 3 years of their programs. There's a mechanical integrity that has to be done. There's a variety of things that they have to do. And so meeting that compliance and helping companies understand what those compliance regulatory items are sometimes is a key component of what we do.
And part of that, I know, too, is the desire to help them go above and beyond.
Correct.
So what would be some examples of solutions that help organizations go above and beyond?
So there's the check the box exercise, right? There's that check the box exercise. And, that's always good. But when a client comes to me and says, okay, we want to do more than that, what is the next step? So we'll take them and say, okay, we help them see how all of the elements fit together. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times the companies look at one component of things. They look at the employee participation piece of it. They look at the audit piece. They look at this piece. So we help them look at how all of those things fit together in a way that really can improve the safety and the environmental protection of everything.
So it's really an interesting process. I'm very fascinated, too, about some of these materials that you're working with. What would be some examples of some of the hazardous materials that people may or may not be familiar with?
So hexane. Hexane is used in the food industry quite a bit to extract materials, and it's flammable. Ammonia is toxic. There's other very nasty chemicals out there that are toxic with, just a whiff of it and a person is dead. There are some highly explosive materials out there that if there's a release, they can create a vapor cloud, and that vapor cloud can create a vapor cloud explosion. So we've heard, several industry elements. Another element is dust hazards. That's fairly new. It's not new, but it's fairly new to be understood that this is something we need to look at.
Dust, really?
Dust can create an explosive environment.
Because it carries, that's really interesting. So when was r.i.s.k actually created? 2010,
October 2010.
And now when you look at it these many years later, I mean, the growth in those amount of years has been exponential. It's been incredible. Is it what you're doing now what you anticipated you'd be doing these years later? Or has it grown beyond your own expectations?
It has and it hasn't. So I didn't expect to be in Brazil yet. I knew that was a goal of mine, but it was a 10-year goal. And so it came sooner than I anticipated. The U.S. office, yes, it is what I expected at this point. So yes and no.
Where is it headquartered?
Houston.
It's out of Houston. So yeah, you mentioned Brazil, and that's a fascinating story. We were talking before we came into the studio for the interview about the Brazilian connection, and I asked Rene, what is it about Brazil that attracted her? And it goes all the way back to being an exchange student for you. You fell in love with Brazil early on. Tell us a little bit about that, and then how it led to what you're doing now there.
So my senior year of high school, I was an exchange student, and that was, I won't tell you what year that was, but it was the first year that it was a
20th
democracy.
Century.
Yeah, it was 20th century. So it was the first year that it was democracy. And so I got to see the people, with all their grassroots startup exploring politics because they hadn't been able to for so many years. They had had 16 years of a dictator. And so I fell in love with the people. And, all these years later, because I still speak Portuguese, one of my largest clients said, "Oh, really, you speak Portuguese? Huh, that's interesting, because we just happen to have several offices down there. Can you help us? And would you consider opening an office in Brazil?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't really thought about it yet, but sure." So, yeah, that's how we ended up in Brazil.
And what was that process like? All of a sudden, you're talking about South America, and you've got to set that all up. And for somebody watching again right now who's being inspired and empowered by you taking charge and really creating this whole scene, tell us about that process. What is that like to do that and to pull it off and have it be successful like it is?
It's challenging. Dealing with Brazil is very challenging. Their business environment is very different than the United States. The first thing I would say is get a good lawyer. And in particular, get a lawyer that has a U.S. presence as well, so that they understand where you're coming from and can help prepare you for where you're going, right? So that would be the first thing I would recommend. Then be patient. Be patient, because it is a long process. It took a little over a year for the office to be finalized in Brazil.
Now in Brazil, I could be guessing wrong, but the assumption would be that the regulatory compliances are a little looser than they are in the United States, maybe?
Around safety, they are. Interestingly enough, their environmental protection is stricter than ours.
Stricter than ours.
Yes.
Wow, that's sort of like a wake-up call for people that didn't realize that as well. So let's talk about your clients. Who are some of the types of clients? I know we've talked about the industries, but can you share anything about clients with us? They probably run across the board.
They run across the board.
Over.
Yes, yeah. So so what would you like to know?
In terms of some of the locations where they're coming from, is
Okay.
it coast to coast and South America? I mean, are you also expanding into Europe and Asia? And
Okay, so our clients are coast to coast. We've got clients from California all the way to, let's see, we just recently did some work in New Jersey, maybe.
Yeah.
All up and down. I've done work in fact, I'm getting ready to go to Canada next week after. We've done work in China. We've done work all over South America, Mexico. Yeah, we'll be doing some work in Europe.
What I like to, you were telling me when we were chatting that you have people, also staff, employees, who are part of the team, who are strategically positioned in key locations around these areas, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that happened by accident.
Really?
Yes.
So semi-strategically.
Yes, that was an accident. It worked out well.
It worked out well.
You know, so for me, as long as a person has access to an airport within a 2-hour drive, then they don't need to move anywhere in particular. They just have to have an airport to get somewhere.
Now, when you look at r.i.s.k. Incorporated, what in terms of the fact that it's been so successful and it's doing incredible things to bring people into compliance, but also safety. I mean, safety of employees, safety of clients, safety really of all of us in the long run. Because if there's an explosion in a community, that affects the entire community. I mean, so it really is an amazing thing that you guys do. What brings you your greatest joy about having initially thought with that team to create this company, to fulfill a need, to assist others who are doing their daily tasks of producing their goods and services, and coming in and assisting them to be able to be more efficient, effective, and do it in a safer way and in a compliant way? When you look back at it all, the satisfaction that you must receive having been able to found and create a company like this that's global, it must be incredible when you look back to the early days.
Yeah. I think for me, when the light bulb goes on, because I work with, we have several old-timers, not that work for me, but several of our clients they've been in the industry for a lot of years, but we also have a lot of young engineers that are coming in. And so across the board, I have a wide range, and I have a wide range of resistance to what we do as well, which is really interesting.
Where does that come from?
You know, I think it's well, it's never happened here, so obviously it can't happen. Well, it happened down the road, you know.
Yeah.
But when the light bulb goes on, I think is what brings me the greatest joy. Absolutely.
Now, you're talking about the light bulb for the other person? When you see, they get it, they understand it, and the importance of it.
When we're talking about a situation and they realize, oh my gosh, I don't have as many safeguards as I thought I had. You know, and you see that light bulb go on when they're all of a sudden now they're engaged in the conversation a little bit more, and you start talking to them about, you know, that incident that almost happened but didn't because that safeguard worked properly. Well, you know, so it's for me, that's the satisfaction in going home and knowing that somebody else is safer.
And I would imagine too, you probably get some feedback from people who do say things like, boy, my God, we're glad you guys came into the picture, because in looking at this situation, we were very close to a disaster happening. You probably get that kind of feedback and those thanks.
Yeah, yes, we do.
So then there's CEO Essence. You thought you were done just with r.i.s.k, right? That's just one part of her amazing life and career. CEO Essence. Was that birthed out of the success of r.i.s.k?
Yes and no. I started talking with someone, and we started talking about my life, and we started talking about who I am, what I'm all about, realized that there's a lot that I have to offer other women. And so I'm uniquely positioned in my world to be able to help other women in theirs. And I've overcome a lot of things in my, not only in my business, but my personal life in order to be able to inspire other women as well. So it came from a conversation.
Really?
Yeah.
So out of that conversation, did you have some fear still? Did you have any trepidation? or were you like gung-ho, all right, that was a good conversation, let's take the bull by the horns and go forward?
There was
I think I know the answer.
There was some fear. There was definitely some fear.
Which is a good thing, right? For anybody
Yes.
watching, if there's a little fear, that may be time to pause, really think it out, make sure this is what you want to do.
Right.
You know, have everything sort of lined up neatly, and not just always jump in impulsively, right?
Right. So there was definitely some thought to it. I had to really look at myself first of all. Did I feel that I had something to offer? And you know, because I just live my life. Yeah, I just live my life. It is what it is. I have a very unique life. I've done some very unique things, as you know. You know, so for me, I don't feel like there's anything extraordinary about my life that I can share with other people. And then in this conversation, it was like, well, Rene, but this, and Rene, but that, and Rene, you could teach this, and Rene, what about that? Mm-hmm. And I had to really step back and think about, okay, so what about my life could I share that would help inspire other people? So
when you were this, Rene, you could do this, Rene, you could do that, Rene, you could do this, was that internally in your head, or were these other people saying, Rene, you should, could?
Both.
It
was both.
You were dealing with the whole thing,
so
right?
I had, you know, I was talking to different people and said, so what do you think of this idea, right? And it was like, well, Rene, you know, when you were in this position, you always had all these people coming and asking for your advice and this and that and the other. And I thought, well, yeah.
Right. It's just automatic.
Okay.
I've had that all my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it was an interesting development for me. The other thing.
Moment.
It was. The other thing for me is that I've always been more comfortable around men. And because I'm tall, I'm 6 foot tall, I stand out, I'm an outspoken woman, I have always been. Women have always tended to be more judgmental of me. And so, you know, there was, do I really want to set myself out there for that? But then I realized, okay, maybe it was just a lack of understanding, maybe there was some fear involved, maybe there was whatever it was, but yes, I have something that I can help teach other people.
That's incredible. So how'd you come up with the name CEO Essence?
Okay.
Is it the essence of Rene?
No, it's essence of us as a woman. Okay.
So tell us about that.
So I work in a male-dominated industry. Gas and oil, right? So I had to learn as a CEO in this industry how I could be in my essence as a woman and still be competitively viable in the business world. And I think that's something that a lot of women face in a lot of different industries.
It's an incredible balancing act.
There's a balancing act. I mentioned earlier that I didn't want a competitive environment. That's where I came from, because that's not who I am.
Right.
You know, I needed a cooperative environment. By the same token, I think women tend to be the nurturers and we tend to be the caregivers. And so we give so much of ourselves, we don't know when to pull back and say, okay, this is my boundary. And so the essence of who we are as women in such a way that we can then speak our CEO voice and be strong and resonate with that.
So people understand, is it a separate company?
Yes.
Tell us about it and how it's obviously totally different than r.i.s.k.
Right.
Tell us about that.
So there are a series of videos that are available, and so that's one aspect of it. And then there's some coaching that is another aspect of it.
And the videos themselves, tell us about what those are.
So the videos themselves talk about listening skills, listening with essence, communication skills, decision making,
confidence building,
mentoring other people, which is I think a challenge for a lot of women. So things that traditionally might be an uncomfortable place for a woman if they use the male model, right?
Oh, so that's the key,
right?
To come at it from that angle.
Right. Whereas if they learn how to come at it from a more intuitive, more visceral place, then it is a more comfortable place. And it is easier, it is less challenging for a woman if they learn how to tap into that in a way that they can then speak their truth.
So there's a series of helpful videos.
Right.
They're sort of like training videos, sort of?
Yeah, so there's some training videos. There's some things that I have learned that I offer as solutions. There are questions that I challenge people to face.
You do, really?
Oh, yes. There are some interesting things that people need to really look into themselves and see. There's a training. Yeah, there's a training involved.
So in addition to the series of videos, what else is in terms of the entire package of CEO Essence?
So I also offer coaching, coaching some women that are trying to build their businesses, and they feel like, okay, I have the business model, I have some of the know-how, so I'm not teaching, you know, like finance and things like that. That's not my thing.
Right.
So it's how do you tap into those things to bring all of those things together in a manner. So there's the coaching aspect, and then there's some speaking. I have some speaking engagements and
going into companies as well and helping?
Not so
or
much
is it more one-on-one?
Well, one-on-one groups. I'll be. In fact, I was just in Brazil last week. And I'll be speaking to a group of women down there, a group of women lawyers that have asked me to come in and speak to them, you know, because I speak Portuguese, and they're intrigued by the idea.
What's some of the feedback you get when you do the speaking and the empowering that you do? It must be phenomenal, even for you, because you can relate to what they're saying because you've lived it, you've gone through it. All aspects of existence, including creating a very successful company,
right.
From an idea and then on paper and then bringing the people together to help facilitate that. So you must, the feedback that you get for yourself must be sensational, knowing you're helping others. Yeah,
so it's interesting. I love the feedback that I get. I love the, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. Again, it's that light bulb, right? I feed off of that. But there are things where somebody will bring something up and oh, hey, I haven't thought of that. And so I end up incorporating things that other people ask, the challenges that they face. You know, I end up incorporating things into my own life, my own business. And so I have those aha moments as well. And I really enjoy that.
That's interesting, because I think you and I had talked about this, is even for myself, a lot of times when I ask questions as a host, interviewer, I'll ask questions that are for the benefit of the audience, of course, but at the same time, I'm learning myself. Oh, gee, that's how they handled it. Oh, that's what the process was, that, and the avenue they took, because maybe that'll be something that I'll incorporate into my own life too. So you do that. So CEO Essence is a big reflection of yourself as well, and taking all the knowledge and the skill and the expertise that you have, and also the desire to empower and inspire people, not just show them, you know, 2 + 2 is 4, and here's you know how you map it all out. It's more about self-confidence, self-worth, trust, believe in yourself. You know, you too can do this. Let me give you the resources, the tools, and the empowerment for when I'm not in the room 24/7 with you and something is presented your way, you can handle it, because you'll think of something that I told you previously or taught you, right? Is that part of what you really hope this is?
I think once women learn how to tap into their intuition in a way that is useful to them, you know, because they might have these gut feelings, and they, you know, they always have had them, and they don't know how to tap into it and combine it with these business concepts in a way that makes it useful for them. So it's just this intuition that they have. So, you know, learning how to tap into that in such a way that becomes useful, then it is very much an empowering thing.
Another thing, too, that I'm sure comes into play a lot are cultural differences. I'm sure you come across a lot of situations where it is a cultural reason why maybe they're not coming forward or stepping forward or following through on these wonderful dreams and ideas they have because of the nature of the culture they're in and from. Tell us about that. How do you work with that situation?
That's a little bit more challenging of a situation to work with, because there are cultures where women aren't supposed to be in a business environment, aren't supposed to be in a business environment.
Lose the word supposed to. Right?
Yes, right. So it becomes a little bit more challenging, and then it becomes a matter of, okay, how much are you willing to step out of your comfort zone? Because if somebody's not willing to step out of the comfort zone to pursue their dreams, then no matter how much I coach, they're never going to get there. You know, so they have to understand that there is some stretch, some growth, some expansion of their world, and there is some discomfort in doing so. But once they get there, once they've done that stretch and growth, then the reward is amazing.
Another thing I found fascinating too when chatting with Rene prior to our interview was learning that she has this intuitive nature and a higher consciousness. You can almost walk into a room of people and sort of feel in advance what the energy is, the positive, the negative, the indifferent. That really is a benefit for your clients as well, because you have that, right? Tell us how that works.
Yeah, so I have really learned to trust my instincts. And
that's not something that happens overnight,
no.
And it's not always easy to do, right?
No. It can be very scary.
You can second guess.
You second guess
rely
it.
on other people instead. Well, they'll do it their way, or...
Yeah, and you know, but I've been bitten enough times when I've learned to trust other people, when I've tried to trust other people, and what they said about this person or that person or the other thing, instead of following my own instinct. So learning to tap into my own and really trust
what feels right, what
has
feels
been,
that gut feeling.
It's a big difference. And so it's a huge thing when I walk into a room and I can feel the differences of the energy, and then therefore I know how to respond to those rather than react.
So how are you able to do that? What for you, and again for anybody that's following along with us here and really taking notes on how this worked, how did Rene get to this point? What were some things that you did for yourself to be able to trust your instincts?
So I've always been the type of person to take a look at any situation after the fact and ask what worked, what didn't work. And if it didn't work, why? What could I have done differently? And if it did work, was it good enough, or could I have done better? So that's the first component of that, right? When I haven't trusted myself, things didn't work well. So I recognized that very early, that when I trusted somebody else's guidance and went against what I was feeling, not a good fit. So that was the first piece of it. The second piece of it was just really recognizing that I was feeling different things. So if I felt things like, for example, in my heart space, and I talk about this in the CEO Essence videos, but for example, if I feel things in my heart space, it's not necessarily a joyful feeling, but it is a correct feeling. It is a, yes, this is the right thing. Even if it's something like firing someone, which is never a fun thing to do, but if I feel that in my heart space, I know it's the right thing for my company. Whereas if I feel something down in my gut, it's more of a reaction. And so then I have to step back and go, okay, what am I reacting to? Because I don't want to be reacting, I want to be responding to something. And so if I feel that I've got this reaction happening, I have to step back and go, okay, where is this energy coming from?
Do you have, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure we all do, have both of those areas, the heart and the gut, competing with one another?
A lot of times. A lot of times. When I have to let somebody go, a lot of times, if I look at it from a business perspective, I feel it in my heart space, right? If I look at it from a personal perspective, because we are a small company, we have developed relationships. I do know people's families. A lot of times that's almost a gut reaction, or I feel it in the rib cage, where it's a compassion kind of energy. And
which is a human.
It's a human
quality.
energy,
It's
yes.
human, yeah.
So recognizing and learning how to balance those, I think, is a critical thing for a woman.
What's interesting, too, is the flip. I think most people would automatically just assume that part where you're thinking about, their family and the compassion for the person would be the heart part. Mm-hmm. And the gut part would be they just do what's right and just go do it because it's good for the company. You would figure, most notably, that it would be the reverse, but it really isn't.
Well, it depends on the situation, right? So you have to really look at, okay, am I thinking about it from a business perspective, and then where am I feeling it? Right. Whereas, am I looking at this from a personal perspective? And yeah, you have to really take a look at which situation am I looking at this from.
Now, the world has changed greatly since the 1950s, 60s, 70s. It's a whole new world now. Technology and advancements and growth, and a lot of cool things are happening. How have you seen changes even in the role of women in the workplace that have been very, very positive, and then areas where there's room for improvement?
I think that I'm going to stay out of some of the politics of it. But first of all, women are in the workplace. And I think that's a very positive thing. Women tend to bring a more cooperative kind of energy with them. And so that's good. Where I see room for improvement is relying on themselves. Right, so they tend to want to, and I'm stereotyping right now, please, for all of you out there. Women tend to either want to be in a more aggressive manner to get that position that they want. They see that they feel like they have to be in order to get there. And what I see as a room for improvement is they don't really need to. They don't really need to. They really can be who they are in order to get what they want. They just need to be able to define that better.
How do they do that?
Trust in themselves. And trust in themselves, trust that they can speak up, trust and moving forward with that. So I was at a male marketing, it was a marketing environment dominated by male. And there were some high-level women there as well. And without exception, every one of them asked me, who are you with? What company are you with? Mm-hmm. Now, contrast that with another thing that I was at that was dominated by women. There were 3 men there, including my husband. And without exception, every one of them said, who do you work for? So women themselves are self-subjugating.
Yeah.
And so they need to learn to trust that they're with an organization, not working for an organization. And once they can make that switch, it changes the energy immediately.
What would be some things in addition to that you have found, or maybe a thread amongst women in the workplace that do tend to hold them back? Is that the dominant thing as far as not trusting themselves? And should you also surround yourself with supportive people to help those times when you are doubting yourself? Like you as a coach, having somebody like Rene Murata there to be able to, when they they're starting to really rethink things and maybe say, oh, well, I don't think I can do that, or I've never done that before, or oh, that's too involved, too risky, or whatever it is. And that could be female or male, it doesn't matter these days. But it's good to have that support system around, right? It
is. I had my husband, so that was my support system. So be careful relying on that. Right? You really need to learn to, I think people
have your own voice.
Really need to learn how to have their own voice. there were many times that I said, okay, I can't do this. And fortunately, I had my husband there, and maybe it's your best friend, and maybe it's your brother, or maybe it's your mother, having a person that can say, yeah, you really can. There are going to be more people that say you can't and you need to give up than there will be people that say you can. Keep moving forward. Or
they tell you sometimes, and I'm sure in discussions maybe you've even had yourself, where they tell you how to do it.
Right.
They put the words in your mouth. Now tomorrow when you go in there, you tell that boss this, 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 and this. And that's not exactly what a person needs, or in this case what a woman wants.
Right.
She wants to be heard, listened, understood, supported, but you don't have to go in and take care of it for me.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah, so they really need a person who can hear them. Maybe that person will offer suggestions, and that's fine, but they really need to learn to trust themselves and really trust that intuition that they have.
So in addition to, well, tell us a little bit about the coaching, how that actually works, the coaching part itself. Do people reach out to you, and does there have to be any sort of prerequisite in order to be coached by Rene? Tell us about that.
No, there's no prerequisite other than they want to move forward with something. They have some intention, right? It can be a business intention, it can be a personal life intention, it can be simply I want to lose 20 pounds. So the personal coaching that I do is not just business oriented, although that is the focus of what I do. So if they reach out, when they reach out, we set guidelines and ground rules about what it is that I can do, because I'm not a counselor. I do not want to be a counselor. There are other people more qualified to do that than I am. I'm a coach. And so I really will help facilitate that person in understanding what it is and shed some light on how they're thinking, and maybe they're thinking it this way, and I go, well, have you thought about it that way? Just to kind of open up their thinking and maybe shift some energy for them.
What I think is, in just putting this all together, the pieces of the puzzle of what you do, a lot of it is threaded together, risk and CEO essence. In terms of with risk, obviously you're aiming to help people achieve compliance, regulatory compliance, but mainly safety. So you're helping, you're assisting.
Right.
With CEO essence, you're doing the same thing.
Right.
You're helping, you're assisting, you're guiding people. So obviously you have this built-in spirit and desire, thirst, calling to want to help other people solve problems, but not just the nuts and bolts technical part of it,
right.
The emotional, empathetic part of it as well. Where do you think that inspiration, that desire comes from for you? We need probably about an hour and a half of that.
Yeah, that's a...
But,
so I think the way I was brought up, I know the way I was brought up.
That's really good. And that's just going back to what you just said.
Yeah.
I know. It's much more of a confident response.
I was brought up in an environment that we had a mix in my house. My mother was working, and she worked full time. A lot of times she was the main breadwinner. And my father was he was always that generous soul. He was always a giving person. He was the person that everybody loved. He
charismatic.
Very charismatic. Yeah. He would take me through the longest line of the grocery store because that person obviously needed a smile.
The cashier.
Cashier. So being brought up in that kind of environment where.
Sounds like my father, too.
Yeah, we were talking
Thinking
earlier.
of the other person.
Always thinking of the other person.
So you've absorbed a lot of these qualities of both.
Right.
Of both.
Yeah.
So it's something that, again, early on, you've always had this desire. Where do you see the company going? Obviously, r.i.s.k is growing and expanding even further. But CEO Essence, which is your newer project, where do you see that going?
So I have a second set of videos that I'm already working on that are some of the same concepts, but in a more advanced, detailed kind of information. But I'd really like to see, I'd really like to see.
I love the way you reinforce that. We should all take notes too, not just da-da-da-da.
Well, you know, but
that's great.
But is a resistance kind of energy, and is a solution kind of energy. It's an inclusion. So for me, that second set of videos is really about helping take that next level. So once you've made the shift, you've been working on all of these other things. Now, what are some of the new things? What are some of the nuances that you're facing with whatever enterprise you've got going on?
What I like too about your approach, Rene, also is that you're not just about telling them information or sort of lecturing people. You give them sort of homework. Right. You like to give them tasks that they can apply, whether it's role playing or various questions to fill out. And that's very important too, to make them feel invested, like they're participating in their own potential success and growth and confidence building, right? Not just say, here, read this entire book and then get back to me. It's really, here, I'm going to put you to work. You have to participate in this because this is your life. You like to do that, hands-on, make them feel like they're invested in it. Tell us a little bit about how you do that.
So, you know, each of the videos is different, right? So some of them, it is more quote, lecture, unquote, and sharing of my life experiences and situations that I have been in. But others are more of, okay, take a look at this situation and take a look at that situation, and which one feels more real to you? Which one's more comfortable to you? Because that's a true indicator of what would be in that heart space, right? So I challenge people to stop and think about things and to look at different situations that they've been in. And so it can be interesting when I've talked to people or they've seen snippets of it, they're like, oh, hey, I hadn't thought of that. That's cool. So it's fun. That's
cool. Now, we talked about risk, talked about CEO essence. She's laughing because she knows that we're not done. I hear, Rene, you even have a clothing line too. How do you have time for a clothing line? Tell us about, how did that develop? That's a whole, the fashion industry is a whole other beast.
That's a whole other beast. So I'm 6 foot tall.
I didn't notice.
You can't tell with me sitting here.
That's right. Your chair's lowered and mine's...
I'm 6 foot tall. So I have always had a challenge finding clothes that fit me properly, that were in a price range that was not astronomical. And as a younger, developing, business person, it was hard for me to find business attire that was appropriate. I didn't want men's jackets that were refashioned for me. I didn't want sheer kinds of materials. So I met designer Salvatore Loriano when I was in Brazil a year and a half ago and asked him to design a couple blouses for me. And so we sat down and we talked for about an hour. My husband was in the room and he just started designing. And he got the essence of who I am as a person in those 5 drawings. And just like that. It was just amazing to work with him. And so then he went and did the blouses, came back, and I fell in love with them. And so then he approached me and said, would you be interested? It took me about 2 seconds to decide yes. Again, I followed that intuition, right?
Where did you think you would have the time?
Okay, that's I mean, that's the bigger challenge.
That after. I felt that heart thing I was talking about, and then the gut, and they were competing. And then there's this time thing.
There's this time thing. So it works out really well though, because I have to travel to Brazil anyway for my other company. He designs. He makes all of the drawings. I'm working with a studio in LA, R.i.s.k, Renaissance Creative Studios, to create the pilots and create the patterns for me. And we've found a factory down in Brazil that can produce the products for us. The biggest challenge has been finding the time and the materials that we want to work with, because I want to work with socially conscious kinds of materials, where they're animal friendly, whether it's environmentally friendly. You know, because this industry is not that. And so finding somebody, so my nephew is now working for me, and so he's been doing a lot of research. He's reached out to a couple different organizations. Salvatore knows a lot of people. He's been in the industry for 35 years. So, you know, we've been researching all of that and finding the materials that make us happy.
Is there a name to the company?
Yes, it's RM Essence.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So playing off the essence. Wow, that's fantastic. So what types of clothing? Are they casual? Are they business? Are they a mix?
So business attire. In fact, this jacket is one of the creations.
Oh, really? It's very nice, very tastefully designed, yeah.
Yeah, and it's business attire for the young at heart executive. So it can be, you know, from somebody who's a bank teller to somebody who's a CEO. And so we wanted something that was business appropriate, that could be taken anywhere and people would be comfortable with.
Now, the clothes themselves, where can people find them? Are they going to be in stores, online?
So we have an online site that will be available once we have this set up. Right now, the site's built, just waiting for the clothes. And
is there a web address, or you're still putting that?
So the web address is rmessence.com.
rmessence.com. So look for that. That'll be constantly updated and new things and freshened as websites generally are. So will there be a situation where there'll be a shopping cart and people can order online and have it shipped anywhere around the world,
Anywhere around the world.
So that has to be exciting for you. I mean, you've got this ball up in this air and the ball up here, and you've got this here.
Yes.
I mean,
it's been, so of everything that I do, it's been the most off the chart for me, because it's a world that I knew nothing about. So it's been a very steep learning curve for me.
So each of these three things, R.i.s.k Incorporated, CEO Essence, and now RM Essence, are things that you didn't necessarily have knowledge of in the beginning, but acquired it on the job training.
On the job
Just
training.
really.
Right.
Wow. But it requires a certain tenacity, patience, skill set to be able to pull that off. Not everybody can just do that and have all three things going like this, and also have the passion and the desire.
Right.
Or can they?
They can. You know, I think that there are personalities that I wouldn't suggest three things.
Right,
you know,
and maybe they're better behind the scenes and just doing a specific task and being phenomenal at that.
Right, and whatever it is, right, be good at what you do and believe in what you do.
And enjoy it.
Really, it's really what it comes down to. And you know, and I've had those jobs that never thought you know, there's nothing fun about being a janitor. I've been a janitor.
What was your very first job?
My very first job, other than babysitting, I worked in an orthodontist's office in the laboratory.
It's a pretty good first job. Wow.
Yeah, just, you know, working with the models of teeth and everything. And then, you know, I've done everything. I worked in a department store, coffee shop. You know, I tutored students in higher level math and sciences. With special needs, they had learning disabilities of some kind.
It's a beautiful thing to do, yeah.
You know, but... so
you have a well-rounded background and experience. You have dabbled in various levels of life and elements within life and different people from different walks of life.
Right.
All of those, you probably wouldn't trade those because they've allowed you to be the person you are today.
Right.
And people can relate to that. So when you are speaking to them, maybe it's a speaking engagement, or maybe you're doing coaching or whatever it may be, or even when you're dealing with your clients with risk, you can really relate to their issues and relate to their problems and their fears, which I think is a fantastic thing all the way around, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
You know, like I said, I've done everything from being a janitor to being a CEO.
Builds
so
character.
Everything in between. And in each given situation, I have chosen to take the best that I could take from each one of them. And
where most people focus on the negative.
I hear
sweeping
a lot,
the floor,
yeah,
I hate this, this is not going to lead to anything, but you turned it around.
But I turned it around and said, okay, you know, yeah, this isn't a glamorous job, but it needs to be done. People appreciate the fact that the bathroom is clean, you know, and is paying my bills. So, you know, I chose to focus on the positives in every case. Did I have my moments of negativity? Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Just briefly getting back to r.i.s.k, the initial company that you founded, part, I'm sure, of that company, the desire to have such a company, in terms of safety and compliance, is also you care about the environment, don't you?
Yes.
I know that's very important to you.
It's a very big piece
Tell
for
us
me.
about that, why it's so important.
Well, I have children, I have grandchildren now, and you know, no matter what people want to say about global warming, whether it exists or doesn't exist, you know, they cannot deny the pollution that is occurring in the ocean. They cannot deny that trees are being cut down. They cannot deny that there's toxic water situations that have happened in, you know, various neighborhoods now. You know, so those are very real things, right? And I want my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and, you know, however many generations beyond me, to be able to experience some of the things that I have. I've lived in Colorado in the Rockies. I've lived in the Sierra Nevadas. I've traveled to beautiful, incredible places around the world, and I want my children, grandchildren, and, you know, generations beyond to be able to experience that. And if we don't protect the environment, it won't happen.
Mm. So part of what you're doing is helping to do that.
Right.
What would you say to somebody who's watching right now who is incredibly empowered, as I am too, just listening to the story, and that's why I love interviewing folks such as yourself, people who really are making a positive difference in the world, because I'm of that mindset as well. Right. And I think it's really, really cool, all the things that you're doing. But somebody watching right now who's on the cusp of taking those steps, even men watching right now, anybody that's on the cusp and they've been holding back, they've been waiting for, which is another thing you can do too, is sometimes you wait because you want all the moons lined up perfectly. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to do that until everything around me is perfect, so no ball can drop. Well, a ball may drop. There may be some failure. That's all part of it. So what would you say to somebody watching right now who's incredibly inspired by what they're hearing when it comes to the Rene Murata life story?
All of the balls won't line, all of their stars won't line up perfectly. And if you wait for that, you'll never get there.
Have you ever done that yourself?
No. No. Because my dad passed away at age 61. And what I can say that my dad taught me was live life. He went for it always, and that's one of the things that he really instilled in me is, yes, there's going to be failures.
Don't try to control everything.
So you can take those failures and you can stop, or you can take those failures and you can take a look at them and use them as learning opportunities. And so I don't choose the words failure. Anytime something has occurred that was not what I expected, instead of looking at it as a failure, I've looked at it as a learning opportunity. So if you're on the cusp, ask yourself, are you using a negative mindset of there's a potential for failure, or are you choosing instead to look at your learning opportunities that you've had along the way and will have along the way? You know, because I've been in business with r.i.s.k now. Prior to r.i.s.k, I had a company, it was FSE Global, and I bought out my partner and switched it to r.i.s.k. So I actually have been in business for 2 years longer. Mm-hmm. So I've been in business now for 9 years, right? I still continue to have those learning opportunities. I've had clients that, you know, we just didn't mesh well. And so I've lost an account that was a large account, or I let an account go that was a large account because of that disagreement or misunderstanding or whatever it was. And so I took each one of those as a learning opportunity. And so if you're on the cusp, ask yourself, which way am I looking at it?
Why do you love what you do? The passion is obviously evident. I see it in your eyes, I hear it in your voice, the detail of everything. You're very, very passionate about what you do. Why is that? I love the way you take a deep breath, too, when you really want to give an answer the proper treatment and with care. And I think you've got the heart and the gut happening at the same time. I think that's terrific. That passion, where does that come from?
It comes from seeing other people's joy. Even in a dark moment, if I can bring a moment of joy, a moment of inspiration, a moment of enlightenment, where that aha moment, or that, oh my gosh, yes, I want to do this, that spark, whatever you want to call it, right? That to me, it feeds me. It feeds me. And, like with CEO Essence, like I shared with you, I had that moment of, really? Me? But in looking back at those moments of my own fear and shifting my energy around and moving it forward and going on beyond, knowing that I can inspire other people and help enlighten other people and how that might occur, and raise the energy, the vibrational energy of the earth because of that. It's a very inspiring thing.
Well, you are an inspiration, and you are an incredibly empowering person. And I know our audience in watching this segment is probably very, very moved by your description of the reasons why you do what you do and the incredible successes that you've had, and really showing them that they too can. Mainly, it seems like the bottom line to all of this too is believing in yourself, having that confidence, whether female or male, because there's a lot of guys that also have been shot down and just, I can't do it, I can't go there. There's a thread to all of this for you, isn't there? These three companies, the clothing line, the CEO Essence, coaching business, and r.i.s.k, are threaded together, aren't they?
Yes.
It was a real pleasure to have you with us.
Likewise. Thank
really
you, Jim.
Incredible. We wish you continued success. We want you
you
to come back. We want to hear more. I know you're on to even bigger and better things, even though you've already done quite a bit in your amazing life. If you'd like to learn more about r.i.s.k Incorporated, well, visit the website. That is www.psmrisk.com. If you'd like to learn about CEO Essence, go to ceoessence.com. And the clothing line as well. And there's probably more. She's going to have a sandwich named after her, I think, in a month. You can go to rmessence.com. Rene Murata, thanks again for joining us. An honor and pleasure, and continued success to you.
Thank you very much.
What a great story, huh? So inspirational. And thank you for joining us as well for CUTV News. I'm Jim Masters. We'll see you next time.